February 2, 1983, Moscow. KGB Headquarters, First Chief Directorate. A cable marked "Strictly Personal" leaves the Center for Residencies across the West. The instruction is new, the tone clinical. Permanent operational assignment to uncover NATO preparations for a nuclear missile attack. Western war, if it comes, will arrive disguised as training under the guise of maneuvers and with the shortest warning. Officers are told to watch the places where decisions are made, the nets where messages move, the stores of blood and fuel that swell before emergencies. A codename stamps the top line, RYaN, Raketno-Yadernoe Napadanie, Nuclear Missile Attack, May 1981, Moscow, Lubyanka. 2 years earlier, the direction is already set. Yuri Andropov, chairing a KGB leadership conference, elevates one task above the rest. Do not miss the enemy's preparations for a first strike. The sentence is plain and heavy. The main objective of our intelligence service is not to miss the military preparations of the enemy, its preparations for a nuclear strike. And it becomes doctrine. The order ripples outward. Collection requirements widen. Residencies are told to add a new lens to everything they see. Spring 1981. East Berlin, Normannenstrasse, Stasi Foreign Intelligence. Allies take notes. East German files record how wide the task will grow. New billets to absorb reporting, an effort to computerize inputs, and, in time, a catalog of indicators. Political, military, intelligence, civil defense, economic, numbered in the hundreds. A line appears in the margins like a whispered break. Clear-headedness about the entire RYaN complex is mandatory. Watch too closely, and patterns appear everywhere. Late 1982, London, Kensington Palace Gardens, the Residentura. The rhythm of RYaN becomes routine. A watcher sits behind drawn curtains and writes down what light can tell him. Late meetings at ministries, guarded doors that used to open freely, a car that idles too long outside a bunker entrance. Another line ticks across the log. Changes in message formats, the frictionless codework that matters only when it changes. Each trace is small. The meaning lives in the sum. January 1983. Zossen, Moscow, Bonn. A map of minutes. In NATO, Pershing II and Griffin deployments move from votes to timetables. In Soviet briefings, the slide that terrifies shows arrows running 5 to 10 minutes into leadership districts. Decapitation is the word that moves pens. A system built to never be surprised starts to look for surprise in everything. February 17, 1983, Moscow. A duplicate of the instruction lands on another desk. The annex lists immediate requirements. Observe the places where nuclear orders might start. Track civil defense preparations, shelters, evacuations, unusual requisitions. Watch airfields, depots, relay nodes, and think laterally. Is there knowledge in churches, in the Vatican's networks, in the schools and hospitals that would feel the first wave of panic? RYaN is not a single sensor. It is the aggregation of human eyesight tied to a bureaucratic metronome. June 1983, Rome. The Vatican's diplomatic desk. A contact mentions parish talk about civil defense leaflets in a NATO country. The watcher notes it without comment. RYaN's rubric gives it a place, indirect political social indicators, and a number. Alone, it is a rumor. In the matrix, it is a dot that might connect to others later. August 1983, Washington, a president's calendar. War games and briefings fit between speeches and trips. The public sees a TV film about nuclear war and argues about it at dinner tables. None of this is hidden. Seen from Moscow through the new lens, it can look like rehearsal. The lens is the danger. September 1st, 1983. The Sea of Japan. Night. A Boeing 747 strays into forbidden sky. Interceptors rise. Tracers puncture the dark. Korean Airlines Flight 007 falls with 269 lives on board. In Western capitals, the language hardens. In Moscow, the reflex is suspicion and defense. RYaN operators are not political leaders, but their pencils catch up fast. A fresh international shock fills boxes labeled Crisis Context. October 1983. Ramstein, High Wycombe, Brussels, Autumn Forge. The NATO calendar enters its busy season. Command post drills, airlift, staff rides that move armies on paper, while radio nets practice the words that would move them for real. Able Archer 83, the nuclear procedures phase, practices the choreography of release. A detail matters here: new or rarely used message formats, the kind of procedural realism that exercises try to simulate, and that RYaN tells officers to treat as a warning. November 2nd to 6th, 1983. Europe. The script tightens. Able Archer's scenario rehearses escalation ladders and decision relays. Some nets go quiet to mimic wartime discipline. Other channels carry messages and formats introduced to make training harder and closer to life. To NATO staffers, it is good craft. To a checklist built to fear novelty in comms, the novelty itself is the alarm. November 7th, 1983, London. The Residentura's night shift. A flash from Moscow tightens attention. Later, a defector will tell the British that residencies were warned to watch NATO readiness during the exercise and to prioritize precisely the kind of signals Able Archer was generating. The specific cable lives in memory and paraphrase. The surrounding documents carry the principle in full. The most dangerous attack will hide inside a drill. November 8, 1983. Zossen, East Germany. Aircraft in Soviet air armies attached to the group of Soviet forces in Germany shift posture. Intercepts listen harder. Fighter bombers move to quick reaction. 30-minute alerts are not declarations of war. They are the sound of a door left on the latch. In Washington and Ramstein, a U.S. 3-star with an intelligence background stares at the same posture and chooses stillness. Leonard Perroots declines to mirror-escalate. Years later, he will call the picture potentially disastrous, not because anyone started a countdown, but because both sides were reading ambiguity as intent. November 9th, 1983. NATO nets. Silence in some lanes, different words in others. Able Archer carries on, ending on the 11th. No shots, no alarms, only after-action notes and the feeling in a few officers' diaries that something fragile had not broken by choice as much as by luck. In Moscow, the exercise is over. In the KGB's files, its shape and the check marks it satisfied linger like the ghost image burned into a screen. Winter 1983 to 1984. London. Quiet rooms. A British service debriefs a man who has decided to walk his information out of Moscow's reach. Oleg Gordievsky, a senior KGB officer in London secretly working for MI6, describes the pressure RYaN created. Headquarters demanded danger. Field officers, wary of appearing blind, sent it. Skeptics existed, but skepticism was not a career path. His recollection becomes the first skeleton of the war scare narrative in the West. February 1984. Moscow. A journal for generals. A Soviet defense minister says the quiet part out loud. NATO exercises have become difficult to distinguish from a real deployment of armed forces for aggression. The sentence works as propaganda and as description of the RYaN lens, which cannot cleanly tell rehearsal from readiness. November 26, 1984. Moscow. A list of warnings bound like a manual. The indicator taxonomy hardens. Politics and military, intelligence activity, civil defense, economics. Hundreds of potential signs, approaching 300, are parsed into ledgers. Cataloging the world this way makes it look interpretable. It also multiplies coincidences. If there are hundreds of ways to signal war, ordinary life will trip dozens every week. January 1989. Ramstein Air Base. The addendum. Perroots drafts an end-of-tour letter that reads in the voice officers use when they intend to be believed. He records the alerts he saw: Soviet air forces on heightened readiness, fighter bombers at 30-minute alert, an NSA warning that the exercise coincided with a raised Soviet posture. He underlines the decision not to mirror-escalate. He writes the phrase that will title future articles, potentially disastrous, and points to the intelligence gap that made it possible. The West did not fully understand the depth of Soviet fear. February 1990. Washington. A report for a president. The President's Foreign Intelligence Advisory Board reviews the season now called the 1983 War Scare. Its conclusion is careful and blunt. U.S. intelligence underestimated Soviet concern. The danger of misinterpretation was real. The report does not claim the Soviets were about to launch. It does claim that misreading could have made it so. November 2018. Washington. Archivists open another box. Declassification surface Soviet-side texts and speeches, Andropov's own words about not missing an enemy strike, and Warsaw Pact commentary that drills looked like deployments. The new paper does not end historians' arguments. It shifts the weight from memoir toward document. What the watchers saw day to day looked like this. London, 0510. A man arrives at a white stone building before dawn. The ministerial floor lights match him. Security adds an outer ring. On the log sheet, this is a single line and a thin arrow drawn along the margin with a time. The same watcher notes an unusual courier bag through a side entrance and adds a second arrow. The checklist calls this political activity. Alone, it is nothing. Together, added to yesterday's cranes at a NATO airfield and tomorrow's exercise traffic, it feels like something. Bonn. 1432, teleprinters chatter in a familiar rhythm until they don't. A liaison uses a format the watcher hasn't seen in the wild. The words are not sensitive, the frame is. A format change lives in the communications indicators column, the kind of realism Abel Archer was designed to practice. In the RYaN ledger, the change is a trumpet. High Wycombe, 2340. A staff officer reheats coffee and reads the same war orders he has read for a decade, only this time the script asks him to imagine a political authorization and move to the next message card without the usual pause. For NATO, better simulation. For the KGB matrix, another square turns green. Zossen, the long corridor. An air regiment's alert board flips from hours to minutes for a training window. The English word is drill. The Soviet shorthand reads Gotovnost, readiness. The difference is clear to the people in the room and invisible to the people watching from a country away. In Ramstein, Perroots watches both the indicator and the gap in understanding and holds still. Moscow. The analytic room, thin paper, tobacco, machine oil. A junior analyst draws diagonal slashes through a table to show rising concern. The wall carries a laminated map of Europe pricked with dots and arrows. Someone pins a clipping about civil defense debates in a Western parliament. RYaN says civil defense talk is a sign. The analyst circles it in red. The method is rational. The accumulation is dangerous. Berlin. The whisper under the march. Stasi officers mirror KGB categories and append their admonition, clear-headedness is mandatory. The caution reads like advice they gave themselves. The more boxes you track, the easier it is to see the outline you fear in randomness. Across 1983, a different room. A Soviet early warning officer named Stanislav Petrov refuses to relay a false satellite alert that shows U.S. missiles rising from the plains. Different month, different system. Same peril. A machine built to save you by sounding the alarm can destroy you by sounding it at the wrong time. Petrov's veto is human. Able Archer needs a different veto, someone on the other side deciding not to confirm a fear. 1981 to 1985. Paper and people. The record that trickles into view, KGB taskers, Stasi summaries, ministerial speeches, Western reviews, turns a defector's recollection into a documented program. The February 1983 cable exists on the page with its command to uncover plans and actions for a surprise strike, including watching leadership evacuation sites, civil defense shelters, and blood banks. The Stasi memoranda exist, with their unease about the scale and psychology of the enterprise. Perroots' letter exists, with its dry description and its warning phrase. The presidential advisory exists, careful in tone and heavy in outcome. None of it proves a war that almost happened. Together, it proves a season when two rational machines, trained to be cautious, could build a crisis out of each other's caution. An ordinary weekday, Brussels, a corridor with maps. A civilian planner talks through a staff ride, arrowing units from one box to another on grease-penciled acetate. He clicks his pen and moves a formation forward in the scenario. He doesn't know that somewhere else a man with a checklist will copy that click as a mark that means unusual activity. The two lines will never be compared. They will only be added to other lines. An ordinary night, Norfolk. A signal checked twice. A petty officer notes a net gone dark for a planned period. The blackout is scripted, the timing posted on the whiteboard. Far away, an analyst who cannot see the whiteboard checks a box titled Comms Discipline. The analyst is doing his job. The scriptwriter is doing his. The danger lies between them. An ordinary morning, Moscow, a conference room. A colonel presents an indicator summary to a deputy who needs numbers for a report. The numbers are clean, their sources are not. He speaks the totals. Political indicators up 3 points, military 6, communications 5, while knowing each point is a story too small to carry this weight. He does not say that. He turns the page. The logic that built RYaN is the logic that almost trapped it. Shorter flight times mean thinner margins. Thinner margins mean a premium on early signs. Early signs are the kinds of things that also happen in exercises, in politics, in the ordinary motion of states. A system built to make sure you never miss the moment can mistake any moment for the one it fears. Gordievsky's memory gives this logic a face. In London, he tells his British handlers that colleagues regarded RYaN with varying degrees of skepticism, but skepticism did not erase the demand for alarming examples. You did not rise by failing to notice. You did not keep your post by telling Moscow to relax. Vicious circle, he calls it. Years later, obituaries will describe how that warning helped Western services understand why Able Archer looked dangerous from the other side. The war scare lives on in the paperwork, because paperwork is what survived. A declassified end-of-tour letter, written in the dry voice officers use when they mean to be believed, tells us more about a choice to hold still than any dramatic retelling could. A presidential advisory's careful prose says the fear was real, even if war was not. A Soviet minister says drills and deployments look the same from far enough away. An archive posts the 1983 tasker with its requests for church gossip and hospital stocks, and you can feel how hungry the system was to know, and how easy it would have been to know the wrong thing. What changed afterward is visible by subtraction. The INF Treaty pulls entire classes of Euro missiles off the chessboard. The map of minutes fades a shade lighter. The pressure behind RYaN's lens eases, but the method, once learned, remains in case studies and lectures, a clean diagram of how two cautious machines can tighten each other's screws. If you lay the season out as dates and rooms, it is unspectacular. A cable sent, an exercise held, a set of alerts raised, a general who does not raise his. The tension hides in the grammar. The Soviet verb for readiness leans forward. The NATO term for simulation sounds like the real thing. The KGB noun for indicators promises certainty and delivers probability. The watchers do their jobs. In 1983, the jobs fit together too well, and back at the start, the phrase that set it moving is still the most revealing. Permanent operational assignment, the cable says, not a surge. A new normal. Watch for preparations hidden in maneuvers and training. Watch for the shortest time. Watch everywhere. When Able Archer arrived, it fit that sentence like a key. The West ran a drill to make sure it knew its lines. The East, having taught itself that a real attack would be hidden in drills, read the lines as a hint. In Zossen, quick reaction boards ticked down. In Ramstein, a general let them tick alone. In Moscow, analysts turned more squares from white to red and waited for what did not come. Years later, the pages meet, the KGB instruction, the Stasi's warning about clear-headedness, the minister's unease in print, the U.S. general's private caution, the president's advisor's verdict. None of them proves a war that almost happened. Together, they prove a season when systems primed for safety could have made one. November 11, 1983, Europe. The last inject ends, the nets relax, the maps fold. The exercise is over, the habits remain. In the files, a new stack lies atop the February instruction, residency reports about leadership movements and radio frames, a Soviet journal clipping on drills and deployments, a Western advisory warning that fear itself can be a signal, a private letter from Ramstein with a careful sentence underlined twice. In the hall, a clock ticks loud in the empty evening. The checklist is still on the desk. It has more green than it used to. It will have more again. November 12, 1983, Moscow, the morning after. A typist replaces the ribbon. A clerk logs incoming cables. A duty officer initials a margin to show he has read it. RYaN does not stop because the exercise has ended. The form still has boxes. The world still provides marks to fill them. The instructions verbs, watch, uncover, report, continue like a heartbeat. And somewhere in the pile is a thin sheet that says what the program always said. Do not miss the moment. The risk is the same as yesterday's. The risk is missing nothing and seeing too much. March 1984. London. A summary for Whitehall. The British head office writes that Able Archer, 83, held 2 to 11 November, differed from earlier drills in a number of ways and would have been of considerable interest to the Soviet authorities. The sentence is dry on purpose. It is a way of putting cause next to effect without claiming more than the record can bear. It also reads like an apology to hindsight. 1985, East Berlin, filing room. An archivist inks a stamp on a folder that lists indicators to recognize adversarial preparations for a surprise nuclear missile attack. The number is not on the cover. It doesn't need to be. You can feel the weight of hundreds of items inside by the way the folder bows. Someone adds a slip reminding readers, again, about clear-headedness. It is the smallest thing in the file. It might be the most honest. 1986. Washington. The advisory delivered. The board's review closes its paragraphs with an old lesson dressed in new dates. When you cannot see the other side's fear, your own routine can look like intent. Hair trigger, the paper calls the relationship a few years earlier. It is not a metaphor anyone wants in a nuclear age, 2016 to 2021. Washington. Another shelf opens. Researchers publish declassified pieces. A British-authored study of the exercise's realism, the Perroots Addendum, the PFI-AB report, a composite of Soviet-side speeches and KGB instructions that set the frame. With each new sheet, the season looks less like legend and more like paperwork that almost produced one. The dates and rooms are ordinary. The risk was ordinary too, the kind that hides in well-run systems. A cable told men and women to notice. They noticed. A drill told officers to simulate. They simulated. A general told himself not to echo someone else's nerves. He didn't. History is sometimes nothing more than those 3 sentences refusing to meet in the wrong order. November 13th, 1983. Europe, quiet. Outside, everything looks the same. Inside, the binders are thicker, the pens scratch less often, the checklist waits. It always will.